Laura was born in Cincinnati, an only child. She attended public grade school. She attended Hughes High School and the Cincinnati School for Creative and Performing Arts. After moving to Chicago, she attended Columbia College and spent several years training with Second City. Laura Hugg began performing at the age of 40. She has been performing and standing up for nearly a decade, which is unusual since she's only 39. Jack Benny helped me out in that one. I graduated at the Second City Conservatory. She performs sketch comedy and does improv. In Chicago, she has performed at Zanies, the Laugh Factory, on the Showcase Comedians You Should Know, the Skokie Theater, and the Chicago Women's Funny Festival, to name but a few. Additionally, she regularly performs with the all-female show, The Kates, and with the North Shore production, Funnier by the Lake, and at various theaters of Second City. For the past 5 years, she has been one of the hosts of the open mic in the Second City Training Center. Presently, she is a board member and regular performer with Laughing Matters Chicago, an organization that gives scholarships to comedy classes to people in recovery programs for addictions, eatings, and behavioral disorders. I could continue talking about Laura's background, but I know no one showed up to hear me speak, but to hear Laura. So I'm proud to give you a Laura hug. That's funny.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Thanks. That's great. Thank you. My name is Laura Hugg. Thank you for having me. There's nothing I like doing, getting up and talking about being funny after they announce a beloved member has passed away, and then we talk about the Trump administration, so that was perfect. That was my opener and my feature. I am a stand-up comic. That is one of I have two jobs, as I sometimes say in my act, like a lot of artists. I do have a day job, and my second job is holding my stomach in. But I would consider comedy, I've been a comic I started stand-up consistently when I was 40 years old, and so I've been performing for 9 years. Thank you for putting that in print, Matt. You know, in the industry, sometimes you're encouraged to be vague about your age, but, you know, I am never let off the hook. So that's nice. Thank you for keeping me honest, whether I want to be or not. So I was performing when I was younger, but I'd stand up specifically. I really started in earnest when I was 40. I did go to a performing arts school when I was in grade school, and I actually went to be an art major. And in that school, and on top of, in addition to your curriculum, I started there in 7th grade. At the time, the school served they taught kids from 4th grade to seniors, and I went in the 7th grade, and I went to be an art major because I like to draw a lot and was a little crafty or whatever, and they made me an art minor and a drama major, and I stopped really over that period of time and going into puberty. I pretty much kind of stopped doing art and just suffered being a drama major. And I think the thing is while I did have ability to perform, and I don't mind getting up in front of people, and I can be a natural MC, I also, like a lot of stand-up comics and maybe a lot of performers, I can be incredibly shy and withdrawn. I like to stay on the edge of a crowd or outside of a crowd. I don't mind being in front of a crowd unless they're throwing rocks, but you know, then I like to get away. So, and that's just sort of that tension that a lot of performers have. And but I did do drama, and then I grew up as my bio said, I was an only child, and I grew up. I'll tell you right off the bat that I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I do go to 12-step programs. I won't say which ones to protect my anonymity, but I go to a couple different ones for alcoholism and for dysfunction and being raised in a dysfunctional family. I don't know if my family knows that I feel I was raised in a dysfunctional family, but that's where comedy comes in, so they don't come to see me anyway, so I can say what I want. And that, so that's sort of that background, my neurosis, my addiction problems, all that kind of stuff, the nervousness that I felt and still feel today as a performer, that informed a lot of my drinking and my drug use and a lot of other stuff, side dishes we say in the rooms, and so they informed each other. And once in a while, that would make for really interesting art, and then a really pretty destructive after party. So I actually stopped going to school, and then I didn't perform. I mean, I would hide under my bed, and then my mom found out, and I failed school, and I went to a school where I didn't have to perform, and then. So anyway, I took a long break from performing, and occasionally I would be asked to do something, but I didn't really do comedy. I did spoken word. I was really obsessed with Edie Sedgwick and Andy Warhol. I mean, two bastions of mental health right there, if you know those people. But, I wanted to be a superstar, but I didn't really want to do any work for it. That does not make me uncommon in this society, not this society, but outside of here. You guys are, I'm sure, super stable. So so anyway, I got I moved to Chicago in the 90s. We'll just say I'm a little hazy. I'm sure there's some paperwork, but around 93 or 94. I was here like 2 years, and then I got sober. I had tried to sober up when I was like 19, 20, and then I left, and I went out for like 6 years, and and then when I came to Chicago, I kind of came to Chicago and thinking I would get my life together in a big city, and it accidentally happened, sort of. I got sober here, I think, because all the people I used to blame for my problems and used to pee on were back in Cincinnati. So I ended up getting sober, but I had started, before I got sober, I had signed up and started going to college for the first time, and a little later, and I was introduced to improv comedy. And at the time that I was in college, I was like, I had done a lot of poetry nights. There's a bar, I don't know if it's still there, called Estelle's in Wicker Park, and that was fun. But it was also like very, it was the sort of drama that really fuels a good drunken cocaine binge. So, I don't know if you've ever had one, so you may not know what I'm talking. And there really isn't really a good one. Like, I'm not advocating. I'm just saying my mind. That's where it was at. So I was like, I got to do something. There was this desire and this hope that kept crawling out of me no matter what. And by the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is the question that Matt gave me, how I got into comedy. Okay, so I went to Columbia, and I was doing theater, but it was very vulnerable and very serious. And my whole life was serious and, unbeknownst to me, also vulnerable. And so I was like, I want to be funny. And there was a show on television for a while, Brett Butler's series. It was called Grace Under Fire. And she was a recovering alcoholic, and it was a situation comedy. And even when I was a kid, I loved Bill Murray. I loved Saturday Night Live. When I became a teenager, I loved Eddie Murphy, was my favorite comic. And when he was on SNL, that was like my favorite time. And I loved Alice. I loved Flo on Alice. I loved all those, One Day at a Time, all the situation comedies, oddly enough, about single mothers. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. And one of my classmates said, why don't you try? I said, I don't want to just do these serious plays. I don't want to take my clothes off on stage now that I'm sober. I didn't do it when I was drinking, but, it might happen that I would take. Okay, anyway. So he said, why don't you try improv? And I didn't really know what improv was. And so one of the things Matt asked me to do was, because I've done improv comedy, which I on occasion will do, like in an improv emergency. I mean, welcome to Chicago, quick, we need some zip zap zop over here, like it doesn't happen. But so and I've done sketch, which I love, and I do stand-up, which I also love, and I like improv sometimes. I like the games. I mean, in my opinion, if you have to go to somebody's improv graduation show, it's really just a painful rite of passage in Chicago. Eventually, you'll be like, how did I end up here again? It's like being jumped into a gang. So I'd rather be jumped into a gang. I started taking improv classes, and actually I signed up for them right before I got sober, and then I was afraid about how I was going to pay, and I was going to quit. And my dad said, why don't you try he said, why don't you try putting something on the plus side of your life and not quit? So I'm like, all right. And so I did. And so that began how I started comedy. And by doing one type of comedy, I got introduced to another kind of comedy. And eventually that came to stand-up. And, and I guess there was a time, by the time I was willing to do it to try to do it no matter the feedback I got from the audience, because when I tried it the first few times, the crowd scared me, the comics scared me, the drinking scared me. I was sober, and I don't necessarily always feel comfortable in a drunken crowd. I will do most shows, but if I don't have to do a show, I don't necessarily want to perform for anyone when they are in a particular type of condition. I will perform for anyone, but if you're under the influence, I'm not, there's a sweet spot where you can have someone's attention, and then they're going to start talking through your act. Or start crying, or, start a fight, or, and then you get a whole crowd, and then, so that's sort of that's my viewpoint on that. Other comics, they don't care. They'll, and that's fine. That's just what makes me feel like I'm the strongest performer I can be. Improv is when usually it's done with other people, like a team or a couple people. You get an idea and you create a reality on the stage. And one person creates the reality. And it can be simply as, let's say, this is my friend Larry. He's a producer by Funnier by the Lake. Thank you for coming out. Larry and I step out, and Larry says, boy, you know what? I'm the first dragon to ever go to college in my family, right? And my job is to yes and that. And yes and doesn't mean go, and you're a great dragon. It means that I am going to say yes to the reality he's created. Within that, I can go, well, in my family, all the dragons went to college, or whatever it is. And even though I might be a little combative to him, I am agreeing that I am in a reality of being somebody else who does not, is willing to hear his sad dragon tale about how they never went to college. Okay. That's what improv is. And then sometimes they have games, and still you're making them up. You're making things up. You can't really teach people to be funny. You have a funny gene, or you don't have a funny gene. You can appreciate it. Not everybody's a natural performer. Not every performer is a great writer. I happen to be both. Well, aren't you fortunate? It's a twofer, no extra charge. Boy, I really was like, oh, I won't be able to use these mics. And now I'm like, yeah, that's bull. So I'm totally comfortable. Sketch is, so that's what improvisational comedy is. And then you're sitting there for a period of time, and there's ways to edit the scenes and create new realities depending on the form of improv. Sketch comedy is where you take a funny idea and you write it out into a play with some dialogue or in a monologue from a character's point of view, or you create a song or a mini musical. So it's a mini play. Those are the sketches you see on Saturday Night Live. Sometimes I have taken my sketch ideas and I have turned them into my stand-up and vice versa and borrowed things. Sometimes one thing works better than another. And actually, when I was at Second City, I think they're a lot more improv-based now, but their improv was to generate sketch ideas. So we might improvise something, and then I want to capture that, and I want to create a scripted work. And then you can invite other people in, they bring in things, you have a director. So that's what sketch comedy is. And you perform these short vignettes, either solo or in a group or an ensemble, and there's different structures to a good sketch comedy show. And I love sketch comedy. The worst thing about that is, and this is sometimes the best, one of the good things about being a stand-up is getting everybody together to rehearse. That is a nightmare, and it is, herding cats, and it happens in every field where there's a group involved, whether it's comedy, music, or softball. You can't get everybody together when you need them. And so in stand-up, I don't need to get anyone together. It's just me. Of course, if I tank and I bomb, it's just me. And it's lonely, sometimes not collaborating with people. So what stand-up is, in a nutshell, as I see it, is you take a funny idea, you write a setup for it, and the setup is creating the context for the audience. So if I come out and I say, I've been trying to lose weight. Now, there's something about losing weight that's funny to me, and I might say, let's see, I'm trying to lose weight. I joined a gym, but it's a home gym, and unfortunately, I have to pass through the kitchen to get to it. So thank you, because that's actually a joke that I've told, which is the truth. So I have to boil it down. I have to try to edit it down to a concise, in most cases, depending on the type of joke it is, to a concise context for you, the audience, and then deliver a punchline that elicits laughter. I mean, it's funny I have to say it, but it's good to be reminded not everything works, So that's what stand-up is. And then there's other kind of stuff. People do musical comedy. No comic who doesn't do musical comedy ever wants to go after a musical act because audiences love them. They usually write some, rip off some song that's write a parody, and the crowds love it. Okay, you can tell right there I was a little bitter, but actually, I love all comics till I get to know them, and so that's what. Or you can do prop comedy, and everyone hates props comics, so that's the best. You're like, thank God I went after a guy. There's no way I can't win. But actually, there's a couple good ones. Carrot Top's huge success in Vegas he's not crying, he's wiping his tears with his hurt feelings with all the money he has when he hears what I have to say about him today. So that's the difference between, Matt suggested, so that's the three different types of comedy. And so I started doing stand-up when I was 40, and the conditions around that were, as I said, I'm sober. I was dating somebody who was sober, and then he stopped being sober. And it was really painful, and I didn't know if he was going to stay sober, and I didn't know what condition he was going to show up at my house in, I had to put my dog to sleep. I don't have children, but I had a dog for 16 years, and he got old. I had him euthanized by my friend Angie. She's a vet. My dog is still dead. She's a great vet. She really did a good job. He was going to happen. Somebody's like, that's a good joke, too, for my friend Angie. But it was heartbreaking, like going through that. And I turned 40. It was right like the year a couple months, he started drinking and using drugs again right before I turned 40. And as I said, in my time doing sketch, I had tried stand-up before, but I was so intimidated that I stopped doing it, and I focused on sketch. But then when the group started to break apart, that was really hard. And so I went through this personal tragedy, and I learned a lot about like this group dynamic. And a lot of my friends at that time were around the time I was turning 40. I have a lot of friends in recovery who have been perfectly comfortable living in is what some people might call sin. And then suddenly they started getting that late in life push to get married and have children. And I found myself, without my boyfriend, whom I loved and who was struggling. And I had that going on. And then, I had put the animal down, and I was getting older. And just like my dog, as the vet said, I wasn't going backwards. And so I thought, I've been through all this. Why, what do I have to be afraid of? I've lived through these things. I've lived through good things. I've lived through bad things. And that's when I personally got the courage to do stand-up. That is not everybody's story, obviously. I have a lot of friends who are very, very young, and they are very, they see their path. They see the path, and all through the time, so this is my experience, and I hope it's useful to you in whatever your endeavors and passions are. But all along, I have shared the stage with people that are on SNL, that have won Emmys, that have won Oscars, that are on television, that have been in movies, that have pretended to have sex with Whitney Houston. I mean, it's like, in the theater sense, and, like famous people. And I was told that I was good by instructors. I was good enough to be on Saturday Night Live. I was good enough to be on the main stage. But I always just somehow seemed to miss that. And I just, for my path, I just didn't always see the path so clearly. I also am a person who has, I can't, no, I can't, that's not for me. There's always a reason why I can't. It's contaminated my soil. And so, not to get into like, I'm going to start using garden, analogies. I'm not a gardener, so I'm going to try to stay away from it. But it's part of my personal work, and it's also part of the material that I have I battle against that. That's why I'm in recovery, where they don't let you off the hook. They're like, do what you're going to say, that keeps you honest. That keeps you closer to, a higher power, no offense. Sorry. I mean, I do believe in God. Here's a joke. I'm weaving it in. I was like, I'm going to hit him with a hard 3 minutes. Also, they were like, should you, I was like, should I play a clip at the top? And I wrote out this comic on Thursday, John McCombs. He goes, well, if they don't like you, then they got to sit through that talk afterwards. And I go, that's a great point. I'll win them over with my great personality, and then I'll hit them with some really mediocre material. So here's what I have to say about God. I do say I do believe in God, and I get my belief in God, like the rest of my family, from 12-step programs. I don't know what I think God is, but here's what I hope God is not. I don't like the concept of God as the Father, and it's not because I have any particular problem with God being male. It's just that I didn't want to go into the afterlife being raised by another single parent. So I had hoped that heaven would hold more for me than me cooking myself a lot of toast. So that's one of my jokes about God, and So that's when I got my courage to do stand-up, and I started going, and I tried to do it as frequently as possible. The other thing that I said to myself at the time, always being a person who's battling her own limitations, I am my own worst enemy. I don't know about you. I got to get through this before I can begin even battling all the ills of society. I was worried about money. Classes are expensive. I don't put classes down. If you want to take a class and that makes you feel comfortable and you want to do it for fun, do it. And if it's the way to springboard yourself into some other venture in your life, do it, check it out. There's plenty of resources to find out how reputable it is. You can ask me if it's comedy related. I don't know anything about automotives. One of the things about stand-up was, I'm like, well, there's always a stage, and I can always practice for free, pretty much for free. You can go to open mics, and you can get stage time, and that makes me a stronger performer, and I'm exercising that muscle. And I tend to be a person who writes. I don't sit down a lot and write. Some people do. I am a person who either writes on their feet, like I'll say something, it'll pop out spontaneously, it'll occur to me in the moment, and hopefully I've recorded my set, which I usually forget to press record, or I try to remember and write it down afterwards. And I also, a lot of my humor comes from talking with my friends. How am I doing on time? I can't see. What's my... 15 minutes. Thank you, whoever said. Thank you, 15. That's what we say in the biz. So, right? I'm Larry in the biz, yeah. So I am one. So some of the ideas that I'm giving are things that have helped me that I didn't come up with. My friend Chris Othick was a director of mine when I have a sketch group, or I was in a sketch group called Hi Betty. I helped start that group. I quit. They still perform. I mean, they're still giving up, putting on a front that they've gone on without me. But I know, 8 years later, it's just a sad, pathetic attempt at them regularly getting together and performing, even though I'm not there. Anyway, so our director, Chris, he was the one who explained why when you go to an open mic, you're like, oh man, I killed at the office, okay? A lot of us kill at the office, we kill with our friends. Then you get to an open mic and you don't kill, but you wish you were dead. So you get no laughter. People are like, what are you talking about? You're droning on for a long time, trying to set up this thing. And in the office, I'm going to use an office as an example. At work, the context is created for us. So if I start ripping on my boss, then the person I'm talking about my boss with totally gets it because they know what a nightmare the boss is, and I'm being funny, and that's it. I cannot necessarily, if the humor is dependent on those details of my office or the movie that I saw or knowing a particular song. Well, if I got up here and all my jokes were dependent on knowing Lil Wayne lyrics, that guy right there, that young guy, might know who Lil Wayne is, and the rest of you probably would not find it funny. That's why, sometimes you have to have broader material. So I have to find ways to build to create the context for you. And so if you're going to try an open mic, keep that in mind and try to boil it down, be concise in the setup, and then try the punchline. But if you recognize there's something funny there probably is. But it is almost like, what is universal? We call it broad, try to be broad. And some people put that down. That means clean or family friendly or a little toothless, not edgy, not, controversial. Family friendly, as I like to say. What do you do when you don't come from a friendly family? So just try not to use the F word. That's all I can offer right there. But, I talk about another thing that I talk about when I suffer from nerves. Usually I go into a low-grade depression, I had 4 shows this week. I had 4 shows the last night. I don't have a regular place I perform. I've performed at the clubs. I always put them in my credits. But the truth is I perform more regularly for someone like my friend Larry here and some other producers, independent producers. That seems to be where the people who seem to like my work. And but I had 4 shows in a row. They were all different. And these are some of the things I like about it and some of the things that I also sometimes don't. On Wednesday, I did a comedy show in a treatment center on the west side of Chicago, which is like the worst neighborhood, and they have a lovely treatment center right in the middle of it. And there was somebody in treatment that I knew. That was funny. He kept asking me to smuggle him out. Like, I go, okay, but I'm taking the bus, so it'll be weird if I bring you in a laundry sack on the bus back to the city. But I'm sure in the West Side that hadn't been the first time there'd been a body in a laundry sack on the bus. And then on Saturday night, I did a banquet at a country club. And then on Friday, I did a bar show. And last night, my friend had a sober show called Serenity Now. It's all sober performers, and there's no alcohol served in the show. And so I get to have these great different experiences. All audiences are different. And it's not the audience's fault that I'm not funny. Sometimes an audience there'll be something that makes them tense. And sometimes if they're really drunk, there'll be people that are really talkative. Sometimes someone will produce a show, and it's what you surprise a regular night at a bar, like, surprise, you're having a lovely evening, and we're going to do a comedy show in the middle of it, That's not really your fault. That's the producer's fault, or the bar's fault. So it's a lot of different, and comics aren't funny sometimes. So I was asked to talk about some of the best things and the worst things, and sometimes that list is the same. Bombing is obviously one, but it happens to everybody. Bombing at an open mic and bombing at a show in the beginning feel similar, and usually it's just bombing at an open mic because in the beginning, you don't get asked to do a lot of shows. And if you do, it's probably a crap show anyway, no offense to all the producers of crap rooms around the world. But bombing that's what I said. When you first go and you're going to tell your 20-minute setup about The Office with a 2-second punchline, that's sort of bombing, but it's an open mic. You're there to practice. It's like the gym. It's not the triathlon. It's where you're training for the triathlon. So keep that in mind. If you decide to try it, this is practice. Say to yourself, this is practice. This isn't it, And then bombing in front of people, that's probably one of my worst times I've certainly had, and there are going to be other times. I hope to go on to bomb at bigger and better venues all over the world. That's one of my hopes and goals. A lot of times, I don't think I'm uncommon. The reason that I bombed was because I did more time than I had material for. And, but I was like, oh yeah, they're going to pay me like $75, which is like a beautiful thing. And sometimes that's a lot of money and sometimes it's not, it depends on where I'm at, what the show's like. And then not having the strength. So that happened the first time. I didn't have any material. I was doing sketch comedy with other people, and I agreed to MC a birthday party, and that was painful. Thank God the guy had a happy and fulfilling life, and he let it slide, but sometimes I still feel like I should track him down and give the money back. It was only $100, but still. Anyway, so hopefully he's dead. So I'm just kidding. Hopefully he's alive. And then I did another one where I did have the material, but the way that I stepped out, there's ideal conditions, like you have somebody introduce you and tell everyone how old you are. And then if you can work my weight in there next time, if we go on the road together, get that in there too, That'd be great. Get a picture of me in a bathing suit. That would really set me up for success. So you want somebody to intro you. You want some ceremony. You want some separate section so that you don't feel like you're sitting next to someone on a bus and then for 40 minutes you're telling them about your drug problem. That's what it feels like when I'm doing, and an audience doesn't find me funny, and I'm doing a lot of material about my recovery. It goes from me being a comic telling jokes to me telling strangers in a basement about my drug habit. So, which I don't have anymore, but I did. So, that's how it is sometimes. Another comic, Tommy Davidson, who used to be on Living Color, said that comedy is like surfing, and you step out, and if you hit that wave right, it's beautiful, and you're riding this big curl, and it's great, and you're in the moment, and everything's working. And if you don't, you get knocked out, and you get, swept under, and the undertow might take you, and you could die. There you go. So he didn't say the death part, but or you can end up on Nixon's Beach, which happened to a friend of mine. She was in the ocean. She got caught in an undertow. She got washed down the shore. She came up. Her boobs are hanging out of her bikini top, and a man with a suit was pointing a rifle in her face and said, "You have to get off this beach," and it was President Nixon's beach. So she walked down the beach. So there you go. It's Republicans. Okay, so no offense if anybody are here. So that's what can happen. And so in that 40-minute show where I bombed, what I did, I had material, I am funny, but what I didn't have was the skill set yet to try to win them back and to be willing to be in that uncomfortable period of time and try to hold the audience and say, I can get you back. I can find something to justify the check that I'm still going to take at the end. That makes me sound like a money grabber. But there's always also one person that might like you, and then that person gets the honored task of having me make eye contact with them for the entire duration of my set, because nobody else likes what I'm saying. So maybe that'll be you one day. Keep that in mind. So those are some of the worst nights that I've had doing stand-up. A couple other things, and I'm getting close to my time, right? Do I have like 5 minutes? I have 5. Okay, you're really counting it down, aren't you? Okay, thank you. Yeah, right. So some of the worst things that happen are when people dogpile on social media. Social media is a gift and a curse. It can be a great tool for networking and advertising. And if somebody expresses an opinion, whether I like it or not, people dogpiling on them and then wanting you to do that. And sometimes that can affect where you get booked, depending on what you say or don't say or how you chime in or don't. Or people are just mean. And that's what I don't like about social media. It is a good place to try jokes, and sometimes. Also, one of the darkest moments, I think, was having somebody who helped me in my career who turned out to be somewhat of a sexual predator, not with me, so I had mixed feelings. I'm like, what's wrong with me? But, no, not really. Okay, I just wasn't his type. But, he really helped me, and I also know that he was a hurt person who hurt people. And it's also being in an isolated art form where I didn't really have a lot of people that I could say, well, what do I do when I love somebody who also has these horrible flaws in their character and I still love them? Where do I sort that out? I'm lucky I have support groups, and I found like 1 or 2 people who knew him who we could and that made me take a break from comedy for a while, because I had to go inside myself and figure out, why am I doing this and what do I expect from the community of comedy, and like, where can I build stuff? So those are some of the worst things. Also, bookers who don't like me, or bookers who book all men. It's not that I don't love men. There are a lot of men in comedy, but now there's a lot of great women in comedy. And like some of the clubs, I won't say who they are, but like it rhymes with Manies. If you look on, like in Old Town, where I lived right down the street and could be ready at a moment's notice. I mean, look, there's a lot of other people they could book. They'll have 3 white guys on their bill. It's like, this isn't the 1980s anymore. This isn't the 1920s, Like, you could put a woman, and I don't like that. But I'm not super vocal about it, because a lot of times those men are my friends, and I'm happy for their individual success. I'm just sad that we can't be broader than that. And then, so those are some of the things that I don't like. And then some of the things that I really like it when people laugh at my jokes. I really like that this quality that I was born with that can be so inappropriate at certain times has a place in the world, and it's on stage. And as I get most of my material, I didn't finish that thought earlier. A lot of my material comes from me talking with my friend, and then I think it's funny. They're laughing. I'm making them laugh, and I realize it's funny, and I'm going to use it. I love you, and the time that we spent talking was personal and special, but now I'm going to turn that into my act, okay? So, you're a part of it, but you're not getting any of the cut. Finding something at whatever age I did, finding something the way that my brain works with. I'm not a math person. I'm not a scientist. As I said, I'm no good with automotives, but I can watch a television show and tell you why it might not be good or why it is good or whatever. which is great because I love watching TV. And then battling my own emotional nature. I mean, that's the best and the worst. I get nervous. I like to be home. I like to have my laundry done. I exercise. I don't like to be around drinkers. I really have nothing in common with most of the comics that are, you know, I'm trying to live, not kill myself. So, and that's it too, you know. Other people, not seeing other people's successes are not my failures, keeping my eyes on my path, that's a curse and a gift, whichever hand is which. You know, so I feel incredibly grateful. And in my hopes and goals, and now I'll stop talking, I would like to tour. I am trying to get the courage up and figure out how I can do it because I'm not really at a point where I want to sleep on a floor. If I'm laying on a floor, something has happened, you know, and I need help. And I would like to tour around more, and I'd like to get my website built. So I hate administrative tasks. I had one more goal and I can't remember what. Maybe do it full time. You know, maybe it's hard for me to vocalize that because then I feel responsible. So if I keep it a secret, nobody knows, and they can think I like killing myself with the schedule I have now. Okay, so I think that's all I have for now. And thank you so much. I hope that I said something useful or helpful or funny. That would be great. But okay, now I'll give it back to Matt. Thank you.
Okay. Well, there's lots of things we could ask, but I'm curious whether when you've been with these people that have gone on to make it, whether your ability to predict who's going to wind up on top is particularly accurate. I know from watching a lot of sports, sometimes a lot of these athletes, you look at the NFL draft, half of them are busts, even if they're first round. Is there like an it factor that you can see, or is it more serendipity?
I guess sometimes it's hard because I try not to look because then I get depressed about my own. I mean, I definitely can spot somebody who I think has star quality, great material, like is a great performer, well-rounded. If I look now at the people I do know, like there's a guy on Saturday Night Live, Chris Redd, who wrote Come Back Barack. He was one of the writers of that song, soul song to Barack Obama. And I was in Second City with him, or we were around there at the same time. And I watched how he was. He was in everything. He did everything. He did all the stuff. And if I were to ask him now, I would probably say, well, what did you sacrifice? You know, what did you give up? But he was doing all the work. He was showing up and I think that you have to, there's talent and there's star quality, but then there's also some sort of drive and function within that drive. So I think that's a necessary quality too. I guess there are people who get freakishly plucked. I don't know, I wasn't one of them. So does that answer your question? So it's a combination of talent and drive. There's also some people that aren't that great. Their talent is their drive, and production and administration and self-promotion. Man, you either got that or that's brutal. You're like, God, that's always the unfunny one I hear from. I'm sorry you didn't ask about that. But.
Hi. Thanks for your talk.
You're welcome.
My question is sort of multidimensional. It's one question, but it's a multidimensional one question, to clarify. And it's sort of about the fine line between like what's funny in we share frame of reference versus funny because we're uncomfortable or it's making us sad. Not in a good uncomfortable. I'm thinking new about a hard problem, but that was really sad. Mm-hmm. Or hard in a way that I can't go anywhere good with. Mm-hmm. And I think about how it affects relationships and your relationship with yourself. It sounds like you're very sort of self-therapeutic with your work, and your relationship with your family or mm-hmm. friends, former or current friends, and the audience. And I feel like all of these things you're veering on a truth and a sharing that can be fun and shared and challenging to my way of understanding the world versus sad and hard, and like, how do you not reveal confidences of friends that hurt them, or whatever? Does that kind of make sense? Like,
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's a multifaceted answer, if that's the word you used. So, as I said, sometimes if I'm not hitting it right, or depending on, it's in delivery, and I think this comes from repetition, is knowing how to, sometimes it's fighting through the pain. Like, I don't feel like telling any jokes today, and if I go up with no energy and told you I was a drug addict at one time, and I don't get, my parents have a fractured relationship, something like that, I had an abortion, something like that, it just sounds like a talk for another program. And it is. And other times I can fake it, and other times I feel completely like I have a context for it, and so a lot of that is my responsibility. And then I think it's knowing the audience too. Like, certain generations are gonna, their taste is, they are gonna accept language, they or not, and then content is a different matter. Like, an older audience might be not fine. I know when Joan Rivers she couldn't say abortion, she said a procedure, and it was controversial. In this day and age, I only have my story, and they say, go with what you know. And so the amount of details I might be more comfortable with in a certain audience or anything, but this is all I have. And there's sometimes where it's like, this is what I got, and I don't do a lot of jokes about shoes, and to not offend people. And then there are some times where a person going to a comedy show to feel better might be the worst idea they ever had. And, I do a show for recovering people, and we have to be careful about glorifying addiction, drug use, weight, sexual contact, sexual activity, sexual assault, suicidal thoughts. We might trigger someone. And I said, well, what happens if somebody got rained on and I talk about the weather? Am I going to trigger them too? And that's when I make the comics laugh. And you just try to navigate it and pull out what you think's going to work, and you walk that line. And there are some people are never going to be funny. They're not going to find it funny. And hopefully it's not the majority. And as far as telling someone else's business, I don't do that, or I pretend it's mine and I have their permission if they're not a comic. A lot of my material I have gotten from other people, but you shouldn't tell other comics joke. That's one thing we don't do, or we shouldn't do. People do it, and then they hate you for it, and rightly so. So, but I will take my friends' personal experiences and use them for my own if they're not going to do it. So does that answer your question? And it's my life. If I want to trash it and burn it to the ground, that's, my right. But I don't do that. I think that's what helps being in a 12-step program, is that I get used to sharing uncomfortable things. But that's been my life, so I don't have another life to joke about.
Can you tell us what your definition of humor is?
No. You look it up in it, whatever the dictionary says. I mean, humor is fun. It's something that's funny, but my style of humor might not be yours. Fun. There's an essential funny quality that all funny people have and funny things have. The content might be offensive and insensitive or against the times. Or it might be uncomfortable and challenging. It might be outdated. It might be too soon. Doesn't mean it's not funny. It just means that the funny is not the first thing that's going to stand out about it in this moment, or you're a terrible person. No. But no, I don't know exactly what it is. I just know that I have it. And I know when someone has it, and I know when someone doesn't. So, and I see a lot of that. So I'd like to stop that, please. Just kidding. I don't know what humor is, but whatever the dictionary says.
Hello.
Hi.
So I sort of feel like you and I should be best friends,
Okay.
you know, until you get to know me.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right back at
so,
you.
For somebody starting out, like, are there a few open mics that you can recommend as like really good for beginners that are like supportive audiences and environments?
Yes. For women, good luck getting one. You might have to go and watch. My suggestion is that you go to mics and check out the temper of the room. And I can, if you Facebook message me or email me, I can tell you some. The Logan Lounge, my friend Leah Berman runs an open mic. She's very friendly. It's a very friendly room to newcomers. It's a legit question. If you ask it on social media in a comedy community page, you're going to get roasted because their idea is just jump in the water and learn how to swim. And that's not going to work for all of us. But there's not one path. But I think it's a good idea, too. What I did was I went and watched rooms and see how I felt. And at least if I'm familiar with the room, then I'm not as uncomfortable. I'm going to be uncomfortable no matter what. So the Logan Lounge comes to mind. Larry, can you think of another open mic that's a newcomer? Second City, but, you know, we do have a limited amount of time. The Pressure open mic on Tuesday nights, Pressure Cafe, that's it. It's on Clark Street, just south of Devon. Pressure Cafe, run by Brandon. Pressure Billiards and Cafe. Okay, well, all right, Pressure Cafe and Billiards. Am I doing an advertisement all of a sudden? Okay.
Hi.
And message me and I'll give you some more. Call me. Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering, who do you personally find funny?
Chris Rock was one of my favorites because I like how he says inappropriate things. I think that's one thing that I think is humor is, like he said something at the Grammys. He goes, R. Kelly's over here and the Olsen twins are in the balcony or something. You know, like he alluded to R. Kelly's being a sexual predator when nobody else. But, you know, I mean, that's an example that excites me. Comics. I liked Ellen. I loved Roseanne Barr, and it breaks my heart that she's really gone off the rails, like in a lot of ways. Who else is really funny? There's some local comedians that I really love. Larry's a good comic. I have to say that because he books me, but he's also funny. I do like a lot of comics. I stopped watching comedy when I started doing it because I see so many at open mics and shows. The Comedians You Should Know is a really good place to check out comics. But the big ones, Ellen DeGeneres, I love Chris Rock, I love Wanda Sykes. I like those kind of regular folksy comics. I loved Bernie Mac. I love the original Kings of Comedy, those four men, even though Steve Harvey's a little bit of a garbage person sometimes in some of his attitudes about women. He's really funny. So if you can rent or downstream, okay. The original Kings of Comedy, D.L. Hughley. I really like political comics that are, you know, funny and give you a little bit of a break. There's probably some other ones, but I can't think of who they are. Oh, Eddie Pepitone. Sorry. Eddie Pepitone. Check out Eddie Pepitone. He is such a lovable person. He's my favorite comic, Eddie Pepitone.
Is Eddie Pepitone local?
No, he's lives in L.A. He's from New York. He's like vegan. He doesn't drink. He's a lovable. You have to see him. He's a freak.
Well, I want to tell you that I think for all of us, you really killed. It was just great.
Thank you. I like to hear it. I don't mind hearing it.
Yeah.
I like that rather than thanks for coming out. You know, it's like, oh, great.
I was curious to know if, so you have the political humorists and other kinds of people, Jerry Seinfeld or whatever's
I like
happening.
Seinfeld too. He's all right. I hope he makes it.
I was curious, is there a kind of material that you really just enjoy talking about that is the sources your humor?
What are they?
Yeah.
I really do. I call myself darkly optimistic. And that is the truth, because I have incredibly dark things that have happened to me, as most people do. I just talk about them. I really like people who address the serious and reverent, that can mix reverence and profane. I like people who can level all the playing fields. I like people who can be very socially conscious in their humor, but also level the left on occasion, because we need to be leveled. I like comedy with a message. If they don't have a message, I like a comic like Jerry Seinfeld, not a message-driven comic, or that one guy who's clean and does the family stuff, but he did play a wife killer on Law and Order: Criminal Intent. You know what I'm talking about? The white, pale guy who does stuff about food, Jim Gaffigan. He does really family-friendly, did like for the Pope and stuff, but like that's his thing, you know? And we do need some comedy that's like safe and has no hardness to it, but he's probably, yeah. So anyway, I like message driven, because I also think that like The Onion and Jon Stewart and people like that have shown that in these absurd times politically on all sides, that the comics, sometimes you can't tell if The Onion is a real headline or not. I mean, The Onion just starts saying the truth, you know? I think that comics have an important job, and to tell the truth. Obviously, the ones who I don't agree with politically, I'd like to hear very little from them, but so that's the comedy that I love the most. It's personal. And if somebody's having a horrible time in the audience, that they can find hope at the end. Like, you can go dark, you can talk about things, but do you have a solution for me at the end? Do you have hope? That's what I love the most, and that's what I try to do in my work.
You mentioned self-promotion, and then you grimaced. I know that a lot of people in show business have an agent, a publicist. Do you have somebody who helps you with that self-promotion? How do you go about it?
I don't. I wish I did. I think you hire somebody if you don't do it on your own. And the reason I grimaced is because, one, I'm bad at it myself. It's not that I don't believe in myself. It's that maybe when I'm supposed to be posting on all levels of social media and building my own website with Weebly or whatever the hell people use, I'm doing my laundry, or I'm with my friends, like I'm trying to live life. And so having a balanced life sometimes takes away from being focused on my profession. I have to have somebody with money, but now maybe, you've given me the idea, maybe I could find somebody who will work for a small amount of money, and I'll get at least more promotion than I have now, and then maybe I'll make more money and be able to get more promotion. So you hire somebody if you can't do it yourself. But some people just never shut up about what they're doing, and they don't care, and they put all kinds of crap on there, but everybody knows who they are, and I'm just, that's not, can be shy, and sometimes I don't want everyone to know what's going on, especially when I'm laying in bed with a bag of Cheetos or whatever. Actually, not Cheetos, because I'm vegan. It's my friend.
I'm going to make an assumption that you evaluate an audience after you have performed or shared your story. Do you have an evaluation of this audience?
That's great.
You haven't got your check yet.
Yeah, right. Well, I didn't, in case people didn't know I was getting paid, you all were probably one of the best audiences I've ever, there's no God in this room, right? So I can lie if I want to. Actually, God knows who, God made me. I do believe in God, so, whatever. I usually evaluate before the show, and I'm like, but I knew this is a talk, so I said, well, literally, didn't put a clip up in case you didn't find the clip I have, and I don't have that many clips. And to be honest, I do some of the same jokes that I did when I started 9 years ago, because my life is stable and nothing has changed. So it's killing my comedy career. But, You know, I forget to film myself. It's one of those things. Like, I could use an assistant, I just can't afford one, you know. But I might just take put a drop in the bucket towards the future. I mean, I'll be dead soon anyway. It won't matter. Hopefully, I mean, no, I won't be. 30 years. I thought I'd be dead by now, but no plan B. Yeah, sometimes we'll say to ourselves, the audience was really uptight, or man, they really did not like that one joke I said about, name the myriad of tasteless material that my beloved peers and I do. But I think this was a pretty attentive for what it was. This isn't a stand-up show, so you all seemed, most of you were listening. I walked a couple of people. I saw him leave out in the parking lot. I don't get his name, but I will. No, a couple people, people yawn. It's warm in here. I'm not going to blame me. I'm going to blame the temperature. But you guys were great. No, it seemed like a great talk, and I kept saying to Matt, I'm like, well, what did the homicide detective do? I want to do what he does, like whatever the homicide detective does, I want to do that. Where did he stand? Where did he sit? Did he drink water? Did he have a pen? So he had a gun though, and I don't have a gun. Does that answer your question? Sorta? Yeah, this is what you get a lot in real life with me. But you were a great audience. You really were attentive, and it's also early, so, I wouldn't count on you after 7 p.m. I'm just going to say that. The majority of you look like you'll be like, wrap it up. Wrap it up. I should have been in bed 4 hours ago, So.
Okay. I did open mics several years ago, started at the age of 35, and I'm wondering if it's still the case. How did you deal with starting at the age of 40? Were there many younger comedians in the open mics? And
I'm always the oldest one, almost always the oldest one. Thank you for asking that question. As I say, I got my courage at 40. I do think Joy Behar is a woman who started later. I think she was around, but she got some steam at older. She had kids and a job, This is where I draw on my support group, my tools of my recovery, my beliefs, my spirituality. That's where I got my strength from. This is what I have. I have to do this. I don't, it's now or never. And sometimes my age was a benefit because it's a diversity spot. I mean, sadly, a 40, plus year old white woman can be a diversity spot in a lineup of 25-year-old white guys, So it gave me a vantage point. It gave me, and most of the time it wasn't a detractor. Occasionally people call me mom, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to nip that in the bud right now. I'm like, I'm a cool aunt, if anything. But, I don't have children or siblings. So, and sometimes it feeds right into my insecurity. And if anybody, I just want to say this, I don't have time, but I don't know if I have time, but if anyone is older, so this is the thing that I encounter about older comics, is that just like an outfit that I bought 25 years ago that's been hanging in the plastic and I'm gonna fit into it one day, a lot of times what we find funny in our humor tastes are now out of date. They are insensitive to the times. And they are going to resonate really poorly with peers if the audience in an open mic is mostly younger people. If my material, I don't want to make anybody paranoid. You have what you have, but it might be good to run it by your grandchild or your niece or a young person who cut your grass and say, hey, does this make me sound like a homophobic, misogynist racist? Even lightly, because some people are just dying to get up there and tell these wife jokes or bend over in the shower jokes. And there are audiences for that, but they're not in a sophisticated liberal bubble city. And I really valued being around younger people because I was getting sober and having to believe in God in my late 20s and 30s. So I missed a youth zeitgeist. I don't get all the references. And by being around younger people and taking them seriously, not that I like them all the time, it really helped me grow. I had to ask what Dragon Ball Z was. I don't even know what that is. I don't know how to airdrop on my iPhone. I called it air dry last night, so I have to be me. I have to talk about my life, but I also have to pay attention to the tastes and the peers, but also not be shaped too much by their voice and lose mine. So they talk a lot about porn and smoking weed, and I don't do those things anymore. Yeah, I'm going to leave it. I don't smoke weed.
The last question.
And, okay.
I think you should hire that gentleman over there to do your promotion.
I might do it. Right. He's retired. It says, retro. Oh, he's retired. I'm not old. I'm old and I can't read. I might. It seems like he might have a lot of time on his hands now, I don't know, so.
And he can still stand up, which is really good.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Is that it, then?
That's it, Sam.
Okay. All right.